So first of all, if you're not familiar with my concept, I am super focused on budget. So budget filmmaking is the magic. So that's what my website is focused on as well. And everything I do is about taking low budget lenses and increasing the quality of the lens sensor relationship is what I call it. So the first lens I recommend is the Nikon 50 1.8. And I'm trying to not be too specific, but in this case, it's such a great lens, I can't help recommending it. But my principle is, generally speaking, a 50 millimeter lens. So I've got a lot of 50 millimeter lenses I've tested, but the Nikon 50 1.8 AFD is the one that has always come out on top for price and performance both. And this works great either on micro four thirds or Super 35 APS-C or full frame. And the way I make it work on micro four thirds is to use this Viltrox, what you're seeing right now, the NF M43X, as a focal reducer to increase the light and reduce the depth of field, as you can see. But the Nikon 50 1.8 can also be used without the focal reducer on Super 35 as a 50. And then there's one little trick. It's a little controversial, but I use a 1.4 teleconverter on full frame, and it turns this into about a 70. And I know that prime purists are against teleconverters, but if you think about it, a 50 millimeter is really, if you're going to use a teleconverter and keep quality, the best lens would be a 50, right? I mean, optically. So it's not such a bad thing to put a teleconverter on it. Now, the reason for that is because you get an equivalent shot for either micro four thirds or Super 35 APS-C, and it's this shot here. It's what you're seeing now. I've got all the distances and everything measured out for my templates, and this is approximately 6 feet from the camera. With micro four thirds, 50 millimeter turns into a 35 on the focal reducer. So 6 feet, 35 millimeter, that's my standard talking head tight shot. So now let's move on to the second lens, and I'm going to talk more about each of these in a minute, but the second lens is a little bit of a surprise to many. A kit lens. This shot is a kit lens. This is the Panasonic 14-42 at 14, but at or near the widest aperture, and that is the key. That's what I always say. Keep your kit lens at the widest angle and at the max aperture. And of course, it's because it's at the widest angle that you get that max aperture. And it's around a 3.5 most of the time. And that's decent. It's good enough. I'm actually shooting at f4 because I've got tons of light here. But you can see that this lens works with 3.5 to 4. So now I'm going to talk about maybe the most surprising recommendation here. A 70-300 full-frame kit telephoto lens from the 90s. So let me show you here on shopgoodwill.com. And what I do typically is I type in 70-300. Just take a look. 70-300 and click search. And what you'll notice is really good deals. I mean, even a Nikon brand here, this is a 70-300, 4 to 5.6 for $29. And I know there's some time left, but look, this even has a 1 cent shipping. I love it when they do that. Handling is actually 0. This is a good deal. So for 1 day left with only one bid, this guy's probably going to get this lens for $29. So there's really good deals on shopgoodwill.com. I'm not an affiliate or a sponsor or anything like that. I should be, but so these are just amazing deals. In fact, this is one that I would highly recommend. And I think that's a great deal. I've got an older Sigma right here. I've got the Quantary right there. And I've actually got many more of these, about 7 or 8. So because I'm testing them for my website, my lens sensor LUTs, because every lens needs different settings. But there are so many options for these 3 lenses. So let's go back and quickly review these and talk about these in detail. And as I said, this is where it becomes sort of a podcast. So if you're not into the details, you can leave. And what I'm going to do is go into the reasoning and the application of these three lenses. So let's talk about that. So first of all, back to the Nikon 50 1.8. So there's a lot to say about having a prime lens that is capable in low light situations. So the 50 1.8 with a focal reducer is what you're seeing here, is capable of, it's almost less than a 1.2. If you do the calculators, the aperture calculators, you'll see that it's a really wide aperture. And you need that for Micro Four Thirds. And with the improving sensor quality, low light capability of APS-C, and then of course full frame, you don't really need 1.4. You can get along with a 1.8 just fine. Even with that strange recommendation of putting a teleconverter on the 50 for full frame use, it's still fine. But now let's talk about the mentality. I talked a little bit about the wide angle kit lens. So this is a wide angle kit lens that came with the camera, and you can buy these very inexpensively if it didn't come with your camera. And it does the job for wide angle, and also I use it for the autofocus. Because most of the time I'm actually using manual focus like this shot here, even though it takes a little bit of testing and then you need to know where to leave the lens set. I find that a shot like this, you can figure out where you're going to focus, some sort of a point here, also on the chart, and then you can figure out the autofocus pretty well and then switch it to manual focus and you're ready. But I've got a lot of other reasons for using autofocus on the wide lens, because the bottom camera, which goes here, is the wide angle. The top camera can go here or here. It really makes it easier to control two cameras at the same time when one of them is autofocus. So then back to the 70-300, the full frame kit telephoto lens. So these 70-300 telephoto lenses are amazing on Micro Four Thirds. They're a 600 millimeter equivalent. And then even when you combine this with a focal reducer, it's still fine. You have plenty of reach. Now for APS-C or full frame, you're barely making it with a 70-300, but you gotta have at least that. So there's more I could say as far as exactly what shots you're going to get with these. Let's just quickly break it down and say that. So what I typically do is I split it into indoor or outdoor use, because a 70-300 is typically a 5.6 at the max, or the max telephoto, but indoors you don't really need a 300 millimeter, and so you're really fine using this only in outdoor situations. And then that 50 is your low light tight shot for indoors. So the one more thing about the 70-300 is there's often a macro. So let's say you want to get an eye super close up of your eye or something like that. That can be done with these 70-300 lenses. And then about the kit lens, the wide angle kit lens, you might ask, well, can you use that indoors? It's not low light capable enough, right? Well, at f3.5, it is just barely workable. Don't zoom in at all, because you lose your maximum aperture as soon as you zoom in a bit. So it's workable. So those three lenses have been getting me through almost everything. Now, you can upgrade. This is my favorite lens sensor combination of all time, the Panasonic GX85. But this, I'll talk about in another video, is an upgrade path that you could take for a couple of reasons. Mostly because this has a shift, up or down.